That'll probably do. Let's flip the camera over and I'll start opening it up from the bottom. We can look at a few things as we go. You start with this back catch release cover. Those screws are chromed brass. They're quite delicate and are easily damaged. The only saving grace is that they're at the bottom of the camera where people aren't looking. Let's remove this. That's fine, that spring's in good condition, it hasn't been damaged. The advance lever. I've got to get under that Leatherette patch. I was able to get under that with my scalpel. And that's come off in one piece. I'd say it looks like it's never been disturbed. 3 screws hold the advance lever in place. That's a bit loose. They were just okay in terms of being tight enough. Now the leatherette, let's get this off, see if it'll come off. It's well stuck. Now we know the leatherette's very badly damaged, but it might serve as patches for another leatherette during a repair. Now, there's obviously chrome trim around the outside, but there's an area in here in the middle where the aluminium body, the casting, is exposed, and the adhesive will often behave differently where it's on the chrome brass trim than it will where it's on the aluminium casting. It's coming away pretty well. It's always a bit tricky getting it around that release button. Now the scalpel isn't cutting stuff so much as acting as a wedge to split things apart. Alright, there's our leatherette. And there you can see corrosion products, those white patches, that's corrosion on the aluminium casting. Let's remove those screws. Now I think there's 6 screws hold the chrome trim on the base of one of these. They're nickel plated. They're the same size as the 2 screws on the chrome top cover by the film rewind button knob, but these are nickel plated screws, not chrome plated screws. If people are not watching what they're doing when they're reassembling the camera, they will sometimes use their chrome plated screws in this position, which of course means when they get to putting the top cover on, they discover they've only got nickel plated screws, which is somewhat uglier. Let's remove that trim. And these are our two levers. This is the lock lever that locks the film at the end of its, when the film advance has reached number 1. This is our release lever, which releases the film advance to allow you to wind on after you've fired your shutter. Alright, let's remove those levers. Remove that for the moment, it's in the way. Right, so single screw here, running into our release lever, or the shaft for the release lever I should say. And there's a clip here, a C clip or an E clip. They're called various things. I'll see if I can get under that with the tip of my tweezers and release it. That's our clip. Now the two springs, I'll pull those off. The two springs are different. One is comparatively stronger and longer, and that goes onto the release lever. The lighter spring here, the shorter one, that goes onto our lock lever. I'll put that rubber band back on there so I don't end up in trouble. Flip this over, pull these two levers out. There's nothing obviously odd about that. I can't tell whether it's bent, we'll have to look closer at that. And the release lever here is very sticky. The release lever has a spring on the tip, and that little spring, its job is to keep the tip of the release lever here in firm contact with the ratchet on the film advance here. Now this is all sticky. Yeah, that's pretty gummy. I think it would probably work okay though. Alright, so what I want to do is clean up these two levers and make sure that they move freely in the casting. So they've got 2 points of friction, if you like, at the top here where they pass through the casting, and at this side where they pass through the casting. And if they've got dirty old dried grease at those points, then they'll be sticky. I'm a little bit suspicious of the state of this one. It doesn't look like that's straight. It may mean nothing at all, but it may mean if this is a bit bent, that there's friction because the space between here and here are no longer what they should be. You know, if it's pinched in slightly, it means that there'll be friction, and so it won't move smoothly in the body. Alright. My natural bent is to strip the camera down entirely right to the chassis and then start reassembling things piece by piece. But we probably want to see if the shutter will work. If this wasn't sticky, if this wasn't sticky, if that screw had been tight, if the bush had been over as far as it possibly can do to reduce the amount of play at this point. Would the shutter have worked? That's the question we don't have the answer to at the moment. Alright, I'll clean these up, put them back in the body, and we'll see. I know that film advance shaft is gummy. It needs to be stripped down. Everything on this camera needs to be stripped down. But at the moment we just want the answer. Would the shutter have worked? We'll have to find out. Let me clean these pieces up and put them back. Well, the lock lever cleaned up easily. Nothing much to see, but this, the release lever, there's something on that shaft. There's some black marks. Naphtha's not really moving them. Whatever it is, it's like glue or something. It certainly scrapes off. Now that was certainly stopping that lever from moving correctly. It would have been stopping it from swiveling into position or maintaining its contact with the ratchet teeth on the bottom of the advance shaft. It also would have stopped it from being able to pop back up and down as required under the tension of the spring. That's very unusual. I don't have an answer as to how that happened. Something sticky has got down there. It's not dried out grease. Alright, that's clean. The other shaft, as I said, cleaned up okay. I'll just clean up the casting here and put those back in place, I think. Now one of them, the lock lever, I'm quite happy that just a quick dab with some naphtha on a cotton bud will probably be sufficient to clean that stickiness off. But this is where that release lever would go. I'm less sure about that. I'm just going to use a toothpick to rub up and down inside that hole in the casting and clear it out. So I've just taken a toothpick, put a bit of naphtha on it, and I'm just working it in that hole in the casting. In the hope that anything that happens to be in there will come out and go away. Well, we'll find out. I'll put those pieces back in place. Alright, I've put those pieces back in. If we press the release lever down, which is what your shutter release would do, if we hold down this lock lever, which is what your frame counter would be doing, we find we can swing the film advance, reaches the end of the stroke, comes back to the beginning of the stroke, and the release lever has popped up into place. At this stage you can't move the film advance, you would fire the shutter, and when you press your shutter release it would press this screw on the top here, which would unlock your film advance and allow you to wind on for the next shot. So we've got a film advance that works, which is something that we didn't have before. I'm going to fit the cocking rack, that one there that I've got, But before I put that in place, I'm going to remove the shutter. I want to be able to get the cocking rack in, prove that it moves smoothly in the camera body, then put the shutter back in and time the cocking action of the shutter correctly to the cocking rack. So, where's the tool for removing the shutter? That's one of these. This wasn't a tool made by Kodak, but it's similar to the tools that Kodak had. You can't buy them, you can make them. Or you can find somebody with a lathe and ask them to make you one. There are dimensions on my website. Dimensions of the important dimensions of the shutter and retaining ring you're trying to deal with. Let's just remove that retaining ring, remove the shutter from the camera, and I'll place the cocking rack in place. That should work. What I'm looking at here is the amount of clearance I've got at this end and how far back that can come in its groove. If I have one tooth fully engaged at this point, it's just about, there's a little bit of clearance there, sufficient. That would certainly work. And the rack comes back to this part of the casting here. It can't come back any further than that, but that would work. We come one tooth further forward, we've got more clearance here, but I suspect that this tip of this here will actually run into the casting at that point. I'll find out. Press down the release lever, hold down the lock lever. I'm keeping some pressure on that film advance. Now that won't reach the end of its stroke. This is hitting the casting, or close enough to it. So I really want to come back to the other position, to there. Press the release lever, hold down the lock lever, swing this through its range of motion. It moves smoothly and freely. I'm going to put its clamp down plates in place. Right, which is this. Get this around the right way. And we've got one screw that holds it at this point. And the guide post. We've got that around the upside down. That's better. And that screw down and the guide post. Of course you can't see any of this because I haven't got my transparent fingers on today, but that is just life as we know it. I'm not going mad doing those two up. I think we'll be right, but I don't know. Now we did have a spacer here before. Now that spacer may or may not be needed, and we won't know unless we test it. Let's put that chrome trim plate on the top here first. Because our bracket sits on top of that. Well, still in the picture? Yeah, just about. It's this camera that I'm using to record this doesn't have a screen that swings down, so I can't see while I'm working what's being filmed. Alright, that should be okay. That back catch doesn't go nicely. Right, let's try this again. I'll press the release, hold down the lock lever, swing this through. It doesn't want to complete its motion. We might be one tooth out up here. Were you watching while I was doing that? Let's find out. Or we might need that spacer. Now that certainly completes. The fact that it didn't want to complete before suggests that there is some tightness there. Let's try that little space that was in there, that shim. See if it makes a difference. Why would it make a difference? Well, it may be that when the rack reaches the end here, it's being pinched by this bracket. Sometimes you can check that just by not tightening the screws down too much. Let's try it again. Okay, normal range of motion. Okay, so that's moving smoothly and apparently correctly. Tighten those two screws up. Have a look at that rack again and see how those teeth are engaged. Now at this point, this is about where the maximum load goes on. I'm just checking to see if there's too much clearance at this point here. Doesn't appear to be. It appears fine. Would it cock the shutter? That's the next question. Okay, got the shutter. Just pop it back on the body. Check that it's seated. Hold down, press down the release, hold down the lock, swing the film advance. Will it complete its action? It did complete its action. Is the shutter cocked? As you can see, the shutter was cocked. Let's try that again. So it's cocking the shutter. So the cocking timing of the cocking rack and the shutter are probably close. They're correct. They're certainly correct enough for our current purposes. We want to look at something else. Now I don't know whether you noticed that when that shutter fired, it wasn't exactly a smooth action. This is where we get to test whether the shutter's any good. Let's set that to an 8. An 8 is a good speed to test on, because if nothing else is wrong with the shutter, you should be able to judge that fairly well. I'll remove that lens. You might be able to see the blades working. That release shaft, yes, that's in place. That's actually not bad. That would be quite acceptable. What's it like on a slow speed? Let's take it right down to a second. Now that's jamming because that release lever wasn't able to rise up, and it wasn't able to rise up because the rubber band here has got too much tension on my shutter release. Oh yeah, 1 second. That's a bit more than 1 second. Let's open that up full aperture so you can see what's happening. Oh look, there's another problem here. I'll show you that now. So there's our shutter not timing correctly at 1 second. But this is a different problem, and another one which would pretty much cripple you. You see, when I change the aperture here, you're not seeing anything happen at the top. That means that we're changing the aperture in the shutter. I'll open this on B so you can see. You can see that the lever's changing the aperture here, but our scale's not moving at the top. It's disconnected. What's caused that? Well, this is another problem, and it's something that would have rendered the camera useless, even if you didn't want the slow speeds. This piece here is the lever connected to the settings, the apertures, the diaphragm. There's a little tab just visible here. That little tab is connected to our scale at the top. The two are supposed to be connected. I'll just tie my shutter release back so it doesn't get away. Well, I'm busy demonstrating this problem, and it's fixed. Now I've racked the focus out to the close focus position. In other words, the shutter's as far forward as it possibly can be. And what I need to do is lift this up away and get this little tab to drop back into the slot, which is back here. And this can be done. Can be done without tools. There's not much you can do with cameras without tools. Okay, so now we've got it. Now when I change the aperture here, you'll see it moves on the scale at the top. So, just bring that back to the infinity position. Let's remove that. I haven't got this screwed down correctly there at the moment. I think that needs to go down another turn, I'd say, so it doesn't foul that button. Let's try it on a second. Maximum aperture so you can see what's happening. Let's try it again. No, it did get there. It's a bit more than a second. Let's put it on an 1/8 and set the self timer. You listening? Self timer stopped running. Bit of poking and prodding, it might finish. Here you go. So this camera had been sold to someone. He believed that he was getting a good working camera. What was he getting? Well, he was getting a camera that couldn't possibly work. And there's little danger. It didn't matter how hard you squinted and looked the other way. There's no way you could have fooled yourself into thinking that that was a working camera in that state. So, yeah, there you go. It's by far and away, it's not absolutely conclusive. I haven't done everything on this camera. It's got to be stripped down, and its future pretty much depends on what I can do with this meter. It's more than a stop out. What it means is that the selenium cell has become insensitive. If I can find a better selenium cell in amongst my parts boxes, and I'm by no means certain of that, then it's possible that I can replace the selenium cell and make the meter useful again. In which case the camera can be serviced and sent back into the world. But that's not today. So thanks for watching.